Hey guys, this is Mark. In this video, I will talk about the process of import and export of user accounts into and out of Backendless. The concepts are fairly self-explanatory. The end result of import is user records located elsewhere would end up in Backendless with all the corresponding data for your users, including their passwords if needed. And the result of export is taking the user records that you have in Backendless and exporting them to some other format. Let's talk about the import first. So the process of import boils down to having a CSV file that contains all the information about your users and then bringing it into Backendless and let Backendless do its job. The question is, how do you format that CSV? The format, for the most part, is fairly straightforward, except one thing. It is the actually definition of individual properties, and it could get rather complex. So the easiest approach for configuring the definition of the properties in the file that you're preparing for the import is to actually go into your users table and configure its schema first. And I will explain why. So before you import, set up your schema, identify all the individual properties that you already have for your existing users located elsewhere, whether it's the email address or name, password, phone number, whatever it is. The password, by the way, column will already be there. So by setting up your schema and identifying individual data types and then determining what the identity column will be, and then for individual columns, you can set up the constraints, whether the data would need to be handled as required or it needs to be unique. So make all those decisions first. Once you have it set up, and let's say you're starting with a blank application, so you set up your schema, then what you should do is just create a dummy record. Just populate by clicking new, you will create a row. And once you have that done, before you do anything with the import, run an export for that data. And to do this, you can just, identify that record. Or let's say you have just one record. For instance, let me just run a query so I have one record. And it could be name equals Thor, since I have only one guy, Thor. So here's my record. So let's imagine that you have configured your schema. You entered that record for your user. After that, select more and do export. So whenever you do more and then select export, whatever is in the current view of your data browser will get exported as a CSV file. And that CSV file will really become a template for the file that you could use to import your users. Once that is done and you saw there was this little green pop-up, it means that the file is ready. And if you switch to the Files section, and in here, you'll find the export directory. It will be there. In here, you will see there is going to be export log that includes additional information that we use primarily for support purposes, but you're welcome to take a look and you will see that here there were no errors. Export users started and then it finished, but the actual CSV will be right here. So download this file, as I'm doing right now. And then once the file is downloaded, open it up in a text editor, or you could just open it up in Excel, which is what I will be doing right now, so we can review the structure of that file. And as soon as I have Excel, there you go. So here's this file. Now, this is the second row is going to be the actual data that I have exported for that user that I had in there. Let's take a look at the first row. And the first row includes the definition of each and every property that exists in your users table. For instance, this one is going to be email. Let me make it larger and just change the scale a little bit. So here we have email. And notice that there is a lot of information in here. So here, this is going to be the name of the column, and then in parentheses, all additional information, including the data type of that column, which is string. The data size is how many characters would be allowed to fit in there. So by default, it is 250. If your emails are going to be shorter, you're welcome to change it to whatever makes sense. It can be 100. These are individual constraints, such as NN stands for not null. UQ means unique. IDX means it is indexed. and IDN means this is the identity column. So that's how the identity column is identified. Likewise, for any other column that you have in there, there will be a definition of that column, and you can see what it is. So you will see how the definition of the column in CSV matches the definition in your schema. So take a moment, become familiar with everything that is in there. By the way, this column right here, that's the user status. We talked about it. And notice that it has a special designation as far as the column name. Do not change the column names in the CSV. So 1 in the user status means it is going to be enabled, 0, it will be disabled, and so on. So using this template, keep the header row the same and then populate the rest with your data. So for instance, let's create import a new user using this format. And that new user, I will use superhero@backendless.com. That's going to be the email address. The name will be superhero. By the way, if that user has ever logged in through an OAuth, so let's say if in your case, when you create it manually, it's not going to happen. But let's say if you exported a user that has logged in through an OAuth, then you will have a value right here in this OAuth identities. Just take it out. You don't really need values for this. Or you could just remove the entire column. So that's that. Then for object ID, an object ID is a special value that is assigned by Backendless to every single record that exists in there. If you do not care what that object ID should be, remove this value. If you care about the actual identity, not the identity of the user, but the identity of the database record, you can actually provide your own values. Make sure that they're long enough. It should be more than 10 characters. And this way, Backendless will recognize and use object IDs that you have assigned to individual records. What else? The owner ID, you can just remove this column. It is not needed. The created column, so that's when the record was created, I would recommend removing it. So some of these, they are included in the template because Backendless just exports the entire table. But from the import perspective, they are not needed and thus should be removed. Okay, something that a lot of people ask, how do we bring users with their existing passwords? It is definitely possible, and I will demonstrate. So the value that you provide in the password column would already need to be encrypted. You cannot provide raw value. So that will require some additional work, but it is definitely possible. First of all, you need to have access to the original raw password of that user, and you would need to go through the encryption mechanism of that user. How do you apply the encryption mechanism? The algorithm to use is called bcrypt. In fact, if you Google bcrypt online, one of the first links is going to be this bcrypt-generator.com. And in here, if you type in the original password, so let's just keep it simple, and let's say it is password. Select the rounds as 10, and then click encrypt. This will be the value that is generated that you need to put into the value for the password for that user. So here, I'm setting up the superhero@backendless.com with an encrypted password. That is the word password. So whatever this original password is, that's going to be the encrypted value. Likewise, you can populate any other column that needs to be in there. So for instance, for phone number, let's say it is 555-1212. So you get an idea. And that's it. So just save this file. Now we have this users.csv. By the way, the file must be named users.csv. The name of the file must correspond to the name of the table. And in here, in Backendless, if we go into Manage and Import, you will need to use this button right here where it says Data Service. So click the button, select the file, and then click Import. The next step will be for Backendless to verify the actual data types of the columns of the properties that you are importing. All of these values will be taken from the CSV. So if you modified any of them, make sure and validate that these are indeed the data types that you need. You can actually overwrite some of the data. So let's say if you want to update existing users, then object ID will be used as the primary key, as the one that identifies that user record. And in this case, if you're importing CSVs, and then some of them, if you're importing a CSV with user records, and some user records already have object ID value, and you selected this checkbox, then those user records will be updated by Backendless. If there is no object ID, they will be created. So this checkbox gives you an ability to override existing records. So once you go through that screen, click Finalize Import, and Backendless starts importing this data. Here I have just one record, so it's going to be very quick. If I go to Data, let me clear the search from Thor. Here we will see that that record, just quickly refresh, should already be somewhere here. Here it is, Superman. So this record is already, I'm sorry, it's not Superman, it's this guy, Superhero. What got me confused that the Superman is disabled, but the record that we imported is Superhero. Actually, I think I made a typo. It says Superher, and let me just confirm that. Yeah, that's what I did, Superher. Let's correct that real quick, Superhero. So we have the Superhero, and then the data that was in the CSV is the data that is now imported. How do we confirm that the password works? The easiest way in Backendless to log in and impersonate a specific user is by going to REST console. And here you can impersonate any existing user by using this icon right here. So if you click this icon, and in here, let's say it's going to be Superhero at Backendless, and the password was password. So that's the one that I typed in the encrypted format in the CSV document. Click Login. And there you go. So the login worked. That means that the password that was specified in the encrypted version worked and was accepted by Backendless. And it now still is the same password that we had for that user at the time when we were importing that user record. And that's the process of the import. So at this point, we have seen how export works and how import works. So as far as the export, what I demonstrated is basically running the export from the current screen. And then what we did, we ran a search, and then we selected more, and then export. Yes, that will export whatever you're looking at. If you want to export the entire table, in this case, you switch to Manage, and then you go into Export. And in here, just select the user's record, and then click Export. By the way, notice that when I selected user's record, the other two tables got selected as well. Watch this. If I select users, boom, To Do and Superpower got selected as well. The reason for this is because my users table has relationships with other two tables. And as a result, whenever you export data in Backendless, it creates the full closure for the table, including other related tables. If you don't care about those relationships, deselect the other two, or whatever it's related to, select the table, click Export. That will start the export process. And you can get a hold of the file by going to Files and Export. So in here, it creates, in this case, creates a zip file with your CSV in there. And if you selected multiple checkboxes on the export screen, the zip file will contain CSVs for all selected tables. That's how it works. So, and then all the data is going to be inside of the zip in the individual CSV files. This covers, I think, everything. Thank you for watching, guys. And as always, happy Backendless coding.